Everybody,
Morning.
if you are interested, and I'm interested, so we can start. Does anyone have a question or a problem?
At the end of the last class, there was a question about responsibility,
Yes,
which you said would take a long time to discuss.
yes,
And in the last 2 weeks before the class was met, I came up against a problem with responsibility, which I called Dr. Hora about. A client of mine came in and announced that she had been thinking about committing suicide for 3 weeks. And when the session was over, I realized that I was very upset and very attached to her. And so I called Dr. Hora for help. And he said it was a problem with a full sense of responsibility on my part. So I would really appreciate some more awareness on that.
Are you all interested in this issue yet? I think it's a very important aspect of our work, and also for anybody else. It is helpful to understand the meaning of the word responsibility. But before we will speak about what the meaning, what this word means, we will speak about what it does not mean. In general usage, the word is synonymous with blameworthiness. You are responsible, we say, which means you are to blame. This is in common usage. It is important for us to separate the concept of responsibility from the concept of culpability. The two have nothing in common. Does everyone know what culpability means? Mea culpa. Do you know what that means? I am to blame. It means blameworthiness. It means I am guilty. I deserve to be punished. As long as we mix up these concepts, we are going to have difficulties in our work, and the patients will perceive this subliminally and will exploit it. Okay? Right? A patient who perceives that the therapist is confused on the issue of responsibility will inadvertently exploit this weakness. If we don't know the difference between being responsible and being culpable, we will be vulnerable to intimidation and exploitation by the patient. And this can take place as a conscious manipulative intent or entirely unconsciously on the part of the patient. Therefore, to be strong and steadfast and firm and authoritative, in our statement, we must know the difference between being responsible and being blameworthy. Who could say what it is? Can any one of you explain the difference between being responsible and being culpable? Nobody there? You
No.
feel culpable?
Being culpable, now I'm trying to project with you that responsibility, not belong. I see responsibility including you of objective and objective answers.
Yes, you're moving in the right direction. Now, responsibility has the root meaning in it. It means the ability to respond. Response ability. Now, we are studying and reading and gaining experience under supervision and learning to increase our capability to respond, our ability to respond in a helpful way to whatever a patient is presenting to us. So our studies include an increasing ability of responsiveness to people's needs. So responsibility is the ability to respond in a helpful way. This is a matter of training. Now, what is culpability?
There's no judgmental thinking.
No, I wouldn't say that. Only when we are accusing people, that is judged, but we are looking at this issue from the standpoint of the therapist. Of course, you could say he is judging himself. You could say that.
But it seems that there's an element of judging and more blaming. And culpability can't be blaming
Self-blame, yeah. Yes, but there is more to that. Culpability presumes personal power. Personal power to do wrong and personal power to do right. It is a self-confirmatory idea. Now, isn't the ability to respond a personal power? You would say it is. How many of you would say it is? 2. The others abstain.
Well, the strength.
It's a strength.
Tricky word.
Tricky. Yes.
You need to find it. But the strength of it.
But is it personal or not?
Okay.
Yes, Clark?
I think you would say it is not. I'm not sure. I don't think I would agree.
That's an honest answer. Very good. It's quite acceptable. You see, the ability to respond is not something that we can take credit for. It is a gift of God. It is God who makes it possible for us to have the ability to respond in an intelligent and helpful way. We cannot take credit for that. You look all very surprised, but this is important. Now, how is it with blameworthiness and culpability and guilt? Is it a personal, or is it God who is giving us the ability to beat ourselves over the head? Yeah.
God gives us the right to take care of ourselves on ourselves. That there is free will.
Yes. Well, of course, this is a theological fine point. From the standpoint of a psychotherapist, it is very important to know that responsiveness is a spiritual faculty, where it's self-blame and blaming and a sense of culpability and guilt is self-confirmatory. If you condemn yourself, you are bragging. Is this clear?
Looking at the responsiveness that provides the healing,
Right, the right responsiveness.
the
Yeah,
culpability would not be healing. It would get in the way
Of
the
course.
healing process.
of course. Right. Well, this is just an additional proof that the idea of culpability, guilt, and self-blame is self-confirmatory. And everything self-confirmatory is pathogenic. Responsiveness, the right kind of responsiveness has healing power in it. And that is always of God. Because there are two ingredients required to be able to respond in a helpful way. One is love, the other is intelligence. Now, the metapsychiatric name for God is love intelligence. As you see, the ability to respond is a function of love intelligence. But self-blame and a sense of guilt and culpability is self-confirmation. Therefore, it is bad for the patient and bad for the therapist. What would you think of a therapist who is boastful and bragging and showing off? You wouldn't think much of such a therapist, would you? Now, blameworthiness, guilt, and culpability is nothing else but negative boasting. You see, when the therapeutic process is proceeding favorably, the credit goes to God. If it is not proceeding favorably, the blame goes to ignorance. Did you say that? Ignorance. Who said that? Oh, you said it. The blame goes to ignorance.
But when you were originally talking about culpability, I would have thought the term might be used in a situation where a therapist knowingly or willfully imparted information which he knew was not true.
Yes. What's your question?
That seems to me to be different from acting in ignorance.
Not really, Clark. You see, there is two kinds of ignorance. There is negative ignorance and there is positive ignorance. Could you define the difference?
Negative ignorance would be lack of information.
Right.
And positive would be possessing information.
Misinformation. He is still ignorant. You see, to be malicious is also ignorance. There are people who are intentionally malicious in their responses, in their behavior. If they knew better, they wouldn't be that way. If they would realize that they are destroying themselves by being malicious, they wouldn't be malicious. If they would understand that in order to prosper in life, one must be always preserving a loving outlook on life. That's the only way to prosper. Malicious people may appear to be getting away things temporarily, but in fact, they are destroying themselves. And they don't know it. So they are just victims of their own ignorance. What is the value of understanding this?
We blame people.
Right.
For ourselves.
For ourselves, and we will be able even to love our enemies. Wouldn't that be nice to be able to love our enemy.
That doesn't preclude subduing.
God subduing them. We're subduing them with a higher intelligence. And with the fear of God.
Whatever. That working in third voice.
Yes, right. Right. But when Jesus made this preposterous statement, love thine enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you, persecute. It sounds preposterous from a purely human, ignorant level. But if you penetrate deeper into the dynamics of the loving mode of being in the world, you can see that it is a very profound existential wisdom which these statements are based on. And you don't have to be Superman to be able to live that way. Only a well-trained psychotherapist who can differentiate with that which is of God and that which is of ignorance. Now, very often we tend to fall into the trap of what Jean mentioned, a false sense of personal responsibility. That can be a very painful condition. One can suffer mental anguish when we fall into that trap. How does that happen? You think you could help us, Jane? How does it happen that we fall into the trap of a false sense of personal responsibility?
Well, I think that in the case that I mentioned, that I gave myself the power of the client's choice, power over her, and that if she made the choice to commit suicide, then I would be to blame, and that if she chose to live, then it would be my credit.
Right. Very good. You see, this is very frequently the experience of beginning psychotherapy. We are so eager to do well and be praised by our supervisors and get recognition that we slip into this way of thinking that if the patient is improving, it is to our credit. And if the patient is getting worse, then we are to blame. Now, if we think this way, even in the secret recesses of our minds, the patient will perceive it subliminally and will have an overwhelming temptation to exploit it and to gain an upper hand over the therapist and make him sweat it out. This is called transference, counter-transference, jam up. Yes, Tom.
couple of years ago, I was taking some training to work on in the crisis unit in New York that I think is very well managed, and I worked there for a couple of years. And of course, one of the first things we had to deal with was the prospect of calls like this. Should be telephone service.
Yes.
And they hooked right away to our sense of magnanimity. They grandiosity. And how tempting it was to rely on that because we simply didn't have enough experience and didn't know what else to use. And the way they got immediately was to emphasize all you have is the phone in your hand. Or you order the voice when you have the phone. So there's a limit to what you can do.
Right.
And it was a great way out of this kind of a trap because we sure used to keep on the phone. All kinds of joke bits on it.
That's a nice way of putting it. They hang all kinds of guilt trips on us. You don't even have to go to church. They'll do it for you.
Yeah, the case of one woman was just starting there. Someone called up and said that the baby's having milk and he didn't work. And he got poor woman cut his dress and he put down the phone without got a cab, got a quart of milk and delivered it.
Yeah.
Three times. But that's what can happen.
Yeah.
Why is it?
Watch yourself.
Oh, I know. I'm in trouble now. What is the meaning of someone's mode of being in the world when they will exploit the character?
Nobody will exploit you if you will understand what we were talking about today. Nobody will even try.
But that wasn't her question. I look at I'm saying, I guess the dynamic there. And the perception of the character
Right.
that I'm interested in. It almost seems to me as though you're talking about a kind of struggle between patient and therapist, or a confrontation on that particular level. The character does not have that kind of responsibility. Yours is a honeycomb on that sense. The patient has.
Gertrude, can you make the question clearer? I know that Elaine didn't ask that question. Nevertheless, the answer, Sally, the answer was relevant. You see, we must understand that it is more important to first to know what the quality of our consciousness is, rather than worry about what the quality of the patient's consciousness is. Because without that, we are looking at the wrong half of the problem. So we don't ask, why is this patient exploiting my sense of culpability? This question will never help. When we're focusing, if it is again this question why, it's a futile question. If you look at the patient, it is the patient's problem that he or she is exploitative of weak points in other people. But this is true of everybody who is unenlightened. And until we have become completely unavailable to exploitation, we will not be able to help any patient. Because even the nicest patient will yield to temptation. Something like that. Right. We see this very often between parents who have a desire to be liked by their children. The moment a child perceives that the parent wants to be liked, the child will become an extortionist. And then you can take the child to a psychologist, and the psychologist will try to figure out why he is an extortionist or how to stop him from being an extortionist. He will never stop being extortionist as long as the parent will want to be liked. See? The desire to be liked makes us corruptible. Try to figure out why he is an extortionist or how to stop him from being an extortionist. He will never stop being extortionist as long as the parent will want to be liked. See? The desire to be liked makes us corruptible. And it is a temptation, an overwhelming temptation to the child to take advantage of that weakness. We see that very often.
It's a burden to the child, not
Of course, exactly. You are sure, do you follow this? You look puzzled.
No, I'm not puzzled. I was just thinking of an incident on my crisis experience on Friday where I just fell into that trap. You may remember that I presented a case about a fellow.
The wheelchair, yes, yeah.
And he has become a sort of weekly therapy session.
Yeah.
But he hangs on, he's just on the phone. This time he said, well, I'm good. 6 o'clock on Friday, and on Friday nights I get very lonely and I get drunk. And he was in bad shape last Friday. His speech was blurred, and it was probably no point in even carrying on a conversation with him. So I said, well, what have you been doing about this loneliness since we last talked? Have you done any of the things we discussed? No, he said, every Friday comes and every Friday I'm getting drunk. And I said, well, one of the ways you might make contact with operationally, if you should get in touch with these people at AA. They probably have a lot of other lonely people that you could. He argued against that. He said, AA is not my bag. And we went back and
not
forth.
my cup of whiskey.
We went back and forth on that. And he must have perceived something in me because he says, well, Gertrude, he said, here I am, I'm a lonely man. And there you are, you're helping people on the telephone. And he said, what you're doing is not doing me one bit of good.
Right. You should come over.
Well, he said, I said, well, there's no point in not talking anymore. Maybe we'll talk again next Friday. He said, yes, I'm going to handcuff. So I was summarily dismissed
Made to feel culpable.
But it didn't last very long. When I did, I must say, I didn't feel as good at the end of that day as I usually feel.
Yes. Yes. Another great weakness which we can easily fall into the trap is the desire to feel good.
I knew I meant that. I knew I
To be liked, to get credit, is all connected with the desire to feel good. And in that case, we are corruptible. We are using our work for ego gratification. And that's a no-no. We are not permitted to derive any ego gratification from our work. Because then we represent a temptation to the patient to take advantage of it and have the power to make us feel good or to make us feel bad. If the patient has this power over the therapist, where is it going to go? No therapy is going to take place. It is a blind alley. Now, most people are seeking ego gratification from everything they do in life. Now, this is, of course, not very enlightening, but it's forgivable in any other profession except psychotherapy. See, a surgeon, an architect, an automobile mechanic, or a businessman, they can derive ego gratifications from their work with impunity, more or less. Except they have a tendency to become more and more egotistical. And that has its problems. But a psychotherapist cannot afford to seek ego gratification from his work, because that makes him corruptible. So the Bible says, when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, then shall it come to pass as it is written. That is swallowed up in victory, and you become a psychotherapist. Now you may ask, if there is no ego gratification to be derived from our work, what good is it? What's in it for us? Right? Why wonder? No, you could say you get money, but you could get money more from selling automobiles or real estate, especially not the heat. What?
Death.
Oh, get so it's not the money, and we are not permitted to derive ego gratification, because that destroys the whole process. What Father? What good is it? For the therapist, I mean. What's in it for him, really?
It's striking there are tremendous opportunities for learning, for discovery, for breaking through the kind of boundaries that he do with that education. That the therapist is effective winning just as much as the client.
Exactly that. That is the greatest reward. Individual growth. Spiritual unfoldment of consciousness, and an increasing appreciation of the creative process which makes this work possible. We are constantly aware of God's participation in our work. Every meeting with a patient is a meeting with God. The therapeutic process proceeds in the presence, in the conscious awareness of the presence of omni-active love intelligence, from moment to moment. As the Zen master puts it, all you have to do is to erase yourself utterly. Do you understand it?
You know, what I thought you might say would be that the greatest gratification is to be an instrument of God or love intelligence.
Yeah. But there's a danger if you put it that way, that you will slip into ego gratification for being an instrument. Right? So the joy of our work lies in seeing God at work in the situation.
Participating with God.
Right, exactly. It is very inspiring. And every time we heal someone, we are healed along with him. And as Dad said, we are constantly evolving in the process. Life is a spiritual journey. And our work is particularly blessed if we seek spiritual realization. And only under those circumstances can we rise above the human frailties of seeking to be liked, admired, get recognition, feel good, and gratify our egos. as long as we are human, we are corruptible. And under those circumstances, psychotherapy is messy, very messy. To be incorruptible means we must transcend our egos. And in order to transcend our egos, we must understand that there is something much better in life than ego gratification. If we don't understand it, it's very hard to get beyond the quest for ego gratification, because most everybody lives on that basis. So this corruptible must put on incorruption. And the process of becoming a psychotherapist entails this struggle to get beyond the desire for ego gratification. Some people don't even try. Interesting to consider this, that when we are corruptible, surely it's not good for us. But we are actually tempting the patient. It is bad for the patient. Just like when a parent has a desire to be liked, it is bad for his children. Now somebody would say, well, why have children? I remember a psychiatrist who used to be visited once in a while by his father. And every time his father would come to visit him, this scene would repeat itself. The father would stand aside and look him over from top to bottom and put his hands on his hips like that and says, so how come I am not getting no pleasure out of you? He was so naive, he assumed that that's the purpose of being a parent, to derive certain pleasure, a certain ego gratification from your children. And this is a general belief, is it not? But boy, did that fellow hate his father. He hated him with a passion.
So in like manner, having children, and then learning from.
Exactly. That's the only valid rationale to have children. To grow while they are growing. Because life is a spiritual journey, whether we like it or not. And without that realization, we are just blindly floundering around from one problem to another.
Is there ever a danger of using children as teachers?
We are not using children as teachers. Who are our teachers? Who are our teachers? This is our problem. Our problems are our teachers. In metapsychiatry, there is a principle which says problems are lessons designed for our edification. Every problem which emerges in our experience is specifically invited by some form of ignorance residing in our consciousness, which needs to be healed. Therefore we say, nothing comes into experience uninvited. So our problems are our teachers. And it is good to welcome them rather than resent them or run away from them or copying out. We must try to learn from every problem the lesson which we must learn, because if we fail to learn, it will keep coming back. But once we learn, then that problem will never come back. But once you let's say, once you understand what we said about culpability and blameworthiness, you will never encounter a patient who will try to exploit you and blackmail you emotionally. It will never occur to them to do that, because you will not be available for that kind of game.